we see a lot of operators out there that haven't optimized this really crucial metric. It's not just the login success rate. As I say, there's things like duration, success of reset, duration of reset. These metrics are absolutely pivotal, particularly, as I say, in an entertainment brand or entertainment arena where, to be honest, if people get bored, they just go to the next operator.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Connected. And this time we're talking with Rob Griffin and Michael Tanaka from Miracle. Miracle is a really interesting company in the sector, and it's the type of thing that I'm so delighted that we have this format to showcase and discuss, because what Robert and Michael have done with their business at Miracle is attack the customer login and authentication in a way to remove friction, improve security, and deliver a much better customer experience, which is sort of a unique niche in the industry, and I look forward to talking with them more about it. Michael, Robert, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So your website says Miracle delivers a powerful suite of cryptographic tools and services allowing businesses to ditch legacy authentication methods, enhance user experience, minimize cost, and maintain top-tier security, all backed by modern cryptographic standards. Sounds amazing. I've had a look at the product, I know, but I mean, let's unpack it a bit. At the heart of it, tell everyone what Miracle Trust does.
Yeah, hopefully we can cast some light on that. I'm not sure the kind of verbiage on the website really slips off the tongue, but well done for reading that out. So the reality is what we're about is helping operators get rid of passwords and provide a multi-factor login that works on any device or browser in just 2 seconds, and really enables customers to log into their account in just the lowest friction way possible, but that's also really secure.
So what provoked you to develop this product? What was the problem you were looking to address?
Well, the reality is that it's widely established that passwords are a huge vector of kind of attack, and therefore risk from a cybersecurity point of view. And that's something that has resulted in a lot of account takeover, a lot of fraud. It's increasingly something that's kind of piquing the attention of regulators, because they're out there trying to protect players and ensure that both funds in the account remain safe, but also customers' data. But the biggest issue of all is actually the commercial aspect, which is just straightforwardly, in gaming and gambling, you need an experience to be fun, right? You're trying to entertain the player. And if they have, a whole kind of pain of trying to log in because they can't remember their password, or they, for whatever reason, aren't able to get an SMS one-time code, or, the code doesn't come, it's just excruciating, particularly when, as I say, not only are they trying to get entertained, but they're also quite often kind of time constrained. So, it's really all three of those considerations, right? The user experience, the regulatory pressure, and the security requirement.
Another thing that drew us to this whole sector, if you look at historically, we've had strong customer authentication, let's say that's a catch-all for 2FAs and MFAs and things like that since before the internet. And really, those legacy technologies have without failed. In other words, every one of them has failed, either being too complex for the user, incompatible to all devices, or perhaps just cost too much. And
Right.
If you look at that, up to this point, when you look at especially gaming operators, and of course many regulators for many years have had the requirement that you have to offer 2FA or some sort of strong customer authentication option, the take-up is typically about 5%. Yeah. So what you're seeing is that the consumers themselves are voting with their feet. They don't generally want it. And it's because of those sort of issues, either for the operator, the cost, but more for the players, the complexity and the compatibility. They just can't run that sort of thing.
Which is a shame, because the intention of the requirement is a good one.
Yeah.
It's
right.
that the
Absolutely.
friction that it introduces is unwelcome. So
absolutely. And
Yeah,
that's a very good segue to the to actually
enter
showing
the
you.
alternative.
Yeah,
show
absolutely.
us the light.
So what you can see is my screen. We've got the ability to integrate both for browser and also for native app. And it's important to understand that, it's just not some browsers, it's 100% of browsers, and it's absolutely any native app you want, whether it's going to be, directly integrated using our SDKs, or maybe using some of our JavaScript libraries, which could be integrated via things like Flutter or React Native or other things like that. But really, the hardest thing to create a strong customer authentication is in the browser itself, because the browser is such a constrained environment for many, many reasons that it's really hard for a lot of other people to create that secure experience unless you do things like a bunch of downloads or installations, plugins, or secondary devices like phones and stuff like that. And in contrast, the only requirements out of the user is to indicate they want to log in, type in a PIN that they selected during the registration process, and that's it.
So Michael, I'm going to describe this because a lot of people that listen to Connected rather than viewing it. So what you've got is a mock operator site. You've clicked login. It presents a modal with a 4-digit PIN entry, keying in that 4-digit PIN, and boom, you're in.
That's it.
What's going on in the background, and how is it that it's so simple yet achieves all the security and responsibility regulatory responsibility is retained in what looks like a very simple process from the customer perspective?
Yeah, it is relatively simple from the customer's perspective, because they're doing a multi-factor authentication, presenting their PIN, which is a knowledge factor, which can only be entered on their trusted device, which is a possession factor. So what that means is that it's pretty much immune to all forms of attack, because most attacks will not have access to your device. And if you look at other attacks, we use some fairly advanced cryptography and a zero-knowledge proof protocol, which makes us immune to things like man-in-the-middle, replay, reverse proxy, a few other attacks like that. So all the typical attacks you'll see in the industry, especially the brute force attacks, like credential stuffing and password spraying, don't even have the capability to start the attack, let alone actually be successful.
Okay, and what the stage at which you're showing in the demo here is an existing customer returning to log in. So the presumption being there was part of a registration process when they were taken through the Miracle Trust configuration where they selected that PIN. And at that time, would you have also fingerprinted their device, and that's why it's device specific as part of the security layer?
Well, it's not quite fingerprinting. There's all sorts of issues with fingerprinting and privacy.
Okay.
What we're doing is we're crafting keys which are highly customized for this particular device and user and service, for that matter. And what that means is that every authentication from every device by every person is unique. So it's not like a username and password which can take place from anywhere around the world. If I log in from this device, it's actually a different authentication takes place than if I log in, let's say, from my mobile.
Okay. Should we look at that?
Yep. Well, first of all, why don't we do the setup? I think that's probably a good idea. So this particular demo has been crafted so we can delete the account and restart the registration process. The other thing you'll notice in all of this is that there's no redirections to any other site or service. So this is what we call the seamless integration. The customers will not know that Miracle's involved at all. The other important thing because of that is that you have absolute discretion and control over the user interface. So anything you want, whenever you want to log in, so user journeys and things are completely customizable to the operator's needs. So in this case, when I sign up, this is a very short registration form. It's not Miracle's form. It's the sort of demos or the operator's form. And of course, it could be anything. It could be a 5-stage process with lots of verification steps, whatever the regulators require, or maybe this might be more representative of the gray market. The important bit is that Miracle doesn't have access to this information. What we're doing is linking in to just a couple bits of data. Oops. Sorry, knocking my other machine over here. Close it all. So what we're doing is linking into just a couple bits of data, and that namely being the ID and the PIN, and establishing that PIN on this device. So when I hit register and get bonus, there's no further actions required out of the user. There's no download, there's no install, there's no system level permissions or anything like that. which means it's extremely clean. It can be initiated anywhere you want. And of course, it doesn't actually then take the user through any other sort of hoops or hurdles where they can essentially fail.
And that's a really important differentiator versus the kind of competing solutions out there. Because typically what you find is that, on registration, a user needs to download an app, or in the case of passkeys, they need to provide some form of user permission to use a passkey. And you just get a number of people who are, not clear on what's happening. Potentially they're kind of caught up between different operating systems and devices. So you get a fallout in that process, and then you're down to a customer support query. It's the way in which we've stripped out, both in the login and also in the registration process, all those potential points of failure that really has resulted in the user experience, and that's evident in the numbers. And I think if there's one single message that I want to leave people with today, it's the fact that for the most part, operators can't look at their login success rate. Why? It's because essentially they've got a whole bunch of bot traffic that is clouding or obfuscating the actual success rate of legitimate users in logging in. And so they don't pay that much attention to what is ultimately the front door of their shop, right? And so by getting rid of all forms of bot traffic, we're just giving you the clean, pure data of of legitimate users, how many get in first time, how quickly do they get in. And so when we say our average login success rate across all of our clients is 99.9%, it's really powerful, because with passwords it's down at like 95%. SMS two-factor authentication is down at like 85%. Sometimes we've seen as low as 65%. So we see a lot of operators out there that haven't optimized this really crucial metric. It's not just the login success rate. As I say, there's things like duration, success of reset, duration of reset. These metrics are absolutely pivotal, particularly, as I say, in an entertainment brand or entertainment arena where, to be honest, if people get bored, they just go to the next operator.
So if a customer forgets their PIN, let's say in a password world today, customer has a forgotten password journey to recover or reinstate a new password, or they might contact customer support. What is the process here if a customer has lost their PIN or forgotten their PIN to get back in, and what visibility does a customer support agent have on that process to assist them?
Well, if you look at in practice, it can be just about any process you want, and in fact, the operator could reuse their password reset process. Generally speaking, when you're looking at a password reset, what you're trying to do is verify the user outside the security of the account. And what that means is you usually need to have some information about them to verify who they are, rather than just their password in that point in time. So as an example, and in this demo as an example, we send a passcode via email. That's just to keep it short, sweet, and easy. But it could just as easily be an SMS or whatever method that the operator normally uses. So Miracle doesn't get involved in that process, partially because of privacy, but also because it's already been built by the operator to do things like a password reset. And if you think a password reset is relatively not very different to a PIN reset.
And I think it's just worth pointing out as well, in geographies like Brazil, there are an awful lot of, and Argentina as well, they're kind of moving to BioID. So, it'll go back to a facial template. We actually provide that as a service, but the reality is you don't need to use our biometric ID as a source of verification. You can use your existing one. We just, as it were, sort of seamlessly stitch into that. So yeah, that can be your source of ID verification trust. It really depends on the user case. But as I say, we never stipulate that. It's down to the operator. So this is, I guess, an important point, because it's kind of common to everything. We're not requiring a particular user flow or stipulated process. It's something that is completely adaptable to the level of risk and the use case of the operator.
And it's also worth.
No, go ahead,
I was just going to say it's worthwhile considering that for some operators that we have that are operating both passwords and PIN, they see about a 10-fold higher password reset versus PIN reset. And if you think about, it's pretty obvious why, because the passwords generally have to have a relatively high complexity,
Yep.
upper, lowercase, alphanumeric, a certain length and so on, versus the PIN where really we tell our users to choose something that's memorable to them. And normally that's not a safe instruction, because of course if you said the same for a password, well then somebody could guess that externally. But in this case, of course, the only people who can possibly guess your PIN are those people who have access to your device. And generally speaking, that's going to be a fairly safe situation. So really people will choose things like their favorite bank card number or something like their kid's date of birth. And that just means that they're going to remember it.
Yeah, and we see this in other, fintech products where it's a PIN login. The banks that I use, the apps for the banks that I use, don't require me to have a alphanumeric 16-digit password each time I log in. They've made it more convenient with a PIN. So you're bringing that into the gaming space.
Yeah, and we feel like we're democratizing it, right? Because essentially we're bringing it at a different price point to enable it to be used in a kind of mass consumer environment.
Okay, and then one thing you mentioned Brazil, regulated market. Now I know you guys are working also with customers in the U.S. market and other regulated markets. So all of this convenience isn't at the expense of good security protocols or regulatory compliance in markets. So I think that's demonstrated. But is it also is there an argument that you're providing an enhanced compliance or enhanced security?
Oh yeah,
as a result.
That's a really important point, actually, because not only are we seeing more and more regulators requiring multi-factor authentication, but also we're now seeing regulators say, hey, actually, we're not okay with SMS two-factor authentication.
Right.
Why? Well, ultimately, it's because it's vulnerable to either SIM swap or it's phishable. That's the kind of most common vector of attack, where you can literally just grab the one-time code. So you've seen the state of Pennsylvania, the regulator there has just said that as of 2027, SMS 2FA will no longer be allowed. But that's something that's also spreading quite quickly in the fintech world. So you've seen it in Malaysia, Hong Kong's banned SMS. Last week you saw the Central Bank of Abu Dhabi, the UAE, they banned the use of SMS. So yeah, the reality is our solution is completely unphishable. In fact, it's resistant to all forms of remote attack. So yeah, you're definitely getting something that's as it were going to meet the requirements of every regulator globally.
Yeah, I mean, and I'd say from my own perspective, looking at it, it's more convenient than an SMS to go grab a code from. I mean, I know the operating system on my iPhone will help me in copying that SMS message received into the field where I need to enter it. But it's sometimes that SMS comes 10 minutes later than when I was in the process. I've already timed out, things like that. You mentioned competitors in the market or then alternatives. What sort of alternatives would operators consider, and what sets you apart from your competitors? You mentioned price was one point.
Yeah, so I mean, by far the kind of lead solution out there is, as I say, SMS 2FA. That's probably 90% of or 95% of two-factor authentication that exists. I should point out that we regard ourselves as competitor to passwords. We think passwords are absolutely broken, and we have plenty of operators who don't have requirements for two-factor authentication who've gone with our solution because they just feel it's so much cleaner. And just from the user experience point of view, pays for itself in the reduced kind of calls to customer support. But in terms of SMS, that's the kind of main competitor within 2FA. Within multi-factor authentication. And yes, you're going to see costs that vary for different geographies, but also success rates that vary. So, for example, in Brazil, over 15% of SMSs sent don't get received. There are other forms of one-time code. Some authenticator apps work on one-time code. Also, WhatsApp is now providing a one-time code delivery solution. You'd be amazed, that's also pretty expensive and requires you to leave the browser, go into WhatsApp, pick up the code, etc., etc. So we feel that there's certainly a user experience advantage with all of these, and a cost advantage. We haven't mentioned, well, we briefly mentioned the kind of passkey solution previously. The main flaw with those is that they don't work on all devices, all browsers, all operating systems. So depending on your geography, you're going to find roughly 5 to 10, but it can be as high as 15% of devices that don't work. And actually that's a growing problem in places like Brazil, because you find a lot of kind of new Chinese handsets, because of the sanctions, have old operating systems that aren't compatible with these new security solutions. So what that means is that the operator is then forced to have a backup, right? So you're forced to have a username and password and/or this passwordless solution. Well, that's not great, because you then end up with a kind of cluttered user interface, and then also the underlying vulnerability of usernames and passwords. So yeah, sorry for the long answer, but that's the kind of overview of the competition.
And I'd also add to that very simply that if you look at something like the States, there are 25, 30 different regulators, and each with very sort of, with different sort of variations within the regulations. And one of the reasons we're engaging with a lot of US operators right now is because what they want is something which will meet the requirements for all the US regulators. So they have a single unified approach across all states, meaning it simplifies everything within their framework and their platform, even from support all the way down to just, to every aspect of their business. But, if you look at the sort of situation as well, if you had something like passkeys, I think passkeys are the obvious one. If somebody's really looking for something new and passwordless and so on, as Rob mentioned, one of the big issues there is compatibility. But the other issue is that it's a different user experience depending upon if you're on Mac, if you're on OS, or sort of iOS or Android or Windows. And of course, if you're on Linux, you can't use them at all in most cases. So if you want to create a single unified experience which can literally be documented no matter what regulated state and no matter what operating system, what browser, and what hardware,
or web-based,
right?
We're the only option there. And there's a simple reason why that's true, which nobody else, I think, really can claim the same thing. All of our cryptography is completely self-contained, and it doesn't have any dependencies that it requires to operate. And so what that really means is it gives out 100% compatibility, but it also means that it allows us to create that single experience, the exact same experience on any system.
Well, look, some really strong, compelling justification or endorsements, let's say, for your solution, but none better than I think seeing it in action. So what I would encourage anyone who's interested in improving their success rate with password logins by customers by doing away with the password and upgrading to a PIN is to talk to Michael or Rob, the co-founders of Miracle, and get more information about what's going on under the hood, because I think the first thing is to see it in action from the customer's perspective. That's an obvious you had me at hello moment when you see that. I think there's going to be a lot of questions about how you actually perform these miracles, but I think you guys are well positioned to answer those questions, as you've got a lot of live installations in the market in high trust environments where regulation is a factor. Cloud-based platform technology providing fast, secure, password-free, multi-factor authentications with a single-step PIN entry. Guys, thank you so much for being on Connected and telling us about Miracle Trust. And if people want to get a hold of you, we'll include a link to your website in the comments below this video. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ashley. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you for watching. See you next time on Connected.